So we'll see if Carney and Trump have any further meetings or exchanges at the APEC summit. What we do know is the Prime Minister is scheduled to have a meeting with another president, China's president, with reports saying that Mark Carney will talk with Xi Jinping on Friday. Now, Canada and China PRC have been having a bit of a rapprochement in recent weeks, and to talk about the potential benefits and pitfalls of expanding that relationship is Charles Burton. Now, Mr. Burton's a former Canadian diplomat to the People's Republic and the author of a new book released last week. It is called The Beaver and The Dragon: How China Outmaneuvered Canada's Diplomacy, Security and Sovereignty. Charles Burton, nice to see you face to face finally.
It's good to be with you.
So listen, as I said, we've been seeing this rapprochement a bit between Canada and China, and that might make sense because China PRC is this country's second largest trading partner. Does it make sense to you, though, to be pursuing more business with China?
Well, I guess the thing is that the Chinese do have the ability to open up their market to our agricultural commodities. I mean, you know, they can decide that they're going to buy soybeans from Canada and not so many from Brazil if that's the will of the central government. So we do have the potential to try and resolve the issue of the tariffs with the United States, unemployment, businesses transferring to the States by selling more to the People's Republic of China. But they're not going to give us more access to their market for nothing. They're going to extract a cost, and I think that cost will be in the non-trade aspects of the relationship.
Okay, non-trade. And when you say that, I think of, for example, China's foreign policy. And there are obviously points of contention between the People's Republic and what Canada views as acceptable. For example, the relationship with Taiwan, the status of the Taiwan Strait, the fact that China has provided material support to Russia during the invasion of Ukraine. What type of pressure do you see being applied to Canada if we pursue greater trade with the People's Republic?
Well, I think the United States won't be happy if we do that. Certainly, you know, the Chinese ambassador has said that the crippling tariffs on our canola seeds would be removed if Canada would remove our 100% tariff on the import of Chinese electric vehicles. I have heard that the United States might consider not allowing Chinese EVs into the United States. So if you owned one and wanted to drive it to Florida, you'll be stopped at the border and told, I guess, to walk or something. So, you know, that is a serious issue. I think in general, the kinds of things that China would expect from Canada in exchange for giving us privileged access to their market would be that we, for example, wouldn't implement the foreign agents registry that Bill C-70 that went through Parliament in June 2024 calls for, that we wouldn't expel Chinese agents, that we wouldn't continue our pursuit over Chinese influence operations in Canada and Chinese harassment of persons of Chinese origin in our country. So, you know, these are concerns that have been quite prominent over the past couple of years with the Ogg Commission and other revelations about Chinese espionage activities and transfer of dual-use military technologies from Canada into China. I don't think China would like us to engage in any way in dealing with those, expelling espionage agents and so on. And essentially, even if we can get the tariffs off the canola, which would be huge because it impacts on 40,000 prairie farmers and, you know, is of the $12 billion of canola that we produce every year, we've been sending $4 or $5 billion to China alone. So that would be a massive improvement. But what prevents China later on if they have some other concern comparable to the crisis we had when we detained the Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou in response to a U.S. extradition request? Would they say, well, you know, your potash has too many rocks in it, or you're subsidizing your pulp and paper? I mean, there's always going to be some way that China can engage in economic leverage against us, and the history of it is that they will.
Okay, so they will. So I do wonder then, how does China PRC view Canada?
I think they see us as a place far away that could serve China's economic rise by providing natural resources. I don't think that they have respect for our political independence or our democratic system. So there's also been broached by the Asia Pacific Foundation the possibility that China would ask Canada to join the Belt and Road Initiative, which is a global infrastructure, maritime and land-based infrastructure program to essentially facilitate the transfer of natural resources from countries like Canada or Africa or South America to Chinese production. All those belts and roads end in China. So that would be something that would get us considerable Chinese investment. They'd want to improve ports and internal transportation facilities. But at what cost for Canada as an independent nation if we become too dependent on the Chinese economy and too readily susceptible to coercion by that regime?
And there has been a signal that there is an openness here in Ottawa for at least starting free trade talks with the People's Republic. So what then is your, advice? Because here we are, we're talking about this because, again, there's going to be a meeting between Mark Carney and Xi Jinping come Friday at the APEC summit. What is your advice then to the government about the things they need to be watching out for?
Well, I think that we should make it clear to the Chinese authorities that we oppose their international behavior. There was a unanimous resolution of the House of Commons declaring that Chinese action against the Uyghurs is tantamount to genocide under the UN Convention on Genocide. I don't think we should hold back on that. And I don't think that we should tolerate agents of the Chinese regime who are harassing our fellow Canadians of Han Chinese or Tibetan or Uyghur origin. I think we really have to tell the Chinese government that we're just not going to tolerate that anymore. And the espionage, the restrictions that we're giving to Chinese access to certain Canadian labs engaged in sensitive research, or in fact China's desire to mine for critical minerals in our north, or China's activities in the Arctic against infringing on Canadian sovereign borders. I think we have to tell them that, we're not going to give way on any of this. But it is possible to sell things that China needs. They need our canola. They need our other agricultural products. And if we can come up with a means of fair, mutually beneficial trade, so be it. But China very rarely doesn't attach non-trade conditions to trade. So it may be difficult for us to engage China in that way. So I think we're better off with the other initiatives that Mr. Carney has undertaken on this trip, the free trade with ASEAN, the negotiations of free trade with the Philippines, the giving Malaysia's Petronas access to developing our liquefied natural gas, and the Trans-Pacific Partnership and more coordination with like-minded countries in Europe. I mean, clearly it's very difficult for us to engage in enduring trustworthy relationships with either China or the United States under current conditions. So I think we have to be seriously looking elsewhere.
Charles Burton, I always appreciate the conversation. Thank you for this. The new book is called The Beaver and the Dragon, How China Outmaneuvered Canada's Diplomacy, Security, and Sovereignty. Charles, thank you again.
Thank you.